As the 20th century drew to its close and our new century began, the battle over the world economy intensified. Some people feared globalization and questioned the benefits. Others welcomed it.
Millions of people today are better off than they would have been without those trends and developments, without globalization. And very few people have been harmed by it.
When the terrible events of September 11 seemed likely to drive the world deeper into a recession, new questions emerged about the perils of the new world economy. How can our now deeply interconnected world cope with a global downturn and rise above other crises? And is global terrorism the dark side of the promise of globalization?
Can't get away from the fact that globalization makes us interdependent. So it's not an option to shed it. So is it going to be on balance positive or negative?
This is the story of how the new global economy was born. A century-long battle as to which would control the commanding heights of the world's economies, governments or markets. The story of intellectual combat over which economic system would truly benefit mankind. The story of epic political struggles to implant those ideas on the nations of the world.
Part of what's happened is a capitalist revolution. At the end of the 20th century, the market economy, the capitalist system, became the only model for the vast majority of the world.
This economic revolution has defined the wealth and fate of nations and will determine the future of the planet.
This new world economy is being driven by technological change and by political change, but none of it would have happened without a revolution in ideas.
Tonight, the battle of ideas that still divides our world.
This program was made possible by
World War II. Sirens sound the alert. German bombers will pound another British city tonight. During the Blitz, the two most important economists of the age shared air warden duty on the roof of King's College. An English gentleman and an Austrian exile, personal friends, but intellectual rivals. How their battle of ideas still shapes our life and society is our story. John Maynard Keynes helped the Allied governments defend freedom by planning their wartime economies. Friedrich von Hayek thought government interference in the economy was a threat to freedom.
The debate over market forces, whether you have an economy that's based upon prices or state planning, has been at the very heart of the economic battles of the last 100 years. For decades, the ideas of John Maynard Keynes dominated the economies of the Western world.
Keynes felt that the market economy would go to excesses, and when things were in difficulty, the market wouldn't work. Therefore, the government had to step in. Hayek felt that the market would eventually take care of itself.
It was only when Hayek was a very old man that his ideas began to prevail and the world began to change.
When Hayek moved back to his native Austria, he was depressed. The success of mixed economies made his free market theories, and Hayek himself, seem more irrelevant than ever.
The world was very much a socialist world. His ideas were not fashionable. Nobody seemed to listen to him. Nobody seemed to agree with him. He was alone.
Hayek found his ideas shunned by the academic world.
Well, most of the departments became dislike me, so much so that I can feel it to the present day. That economists very largely tend to treat me as an outsider.
He was living in a provincial town and stuck in a rut. But the outside world was beginning to change. Skimming the newspaper in his usual restaurant, Hayek read how inflation and unemployment were rising at the same time. There was a new word to describe it: stagflation. After 30 glorious years of growth, the American economy was in trouble.
The economy basically was kind of going nowhere and had inflation, which didn't seem to get cured, and kind of a malaise in the economy.
Stagflation was the end of naive Keynesianism. You had two things at the same time, which under the Keynesian view would have been impossible. You had stagnation in the economy, a high level of unemployment. You had inflation with prices rising rapidly.
President Nixon looked like a Chicago economist's dream come true. Milton Friedman was a special advisor, and George Shultz was in charge of the budget.
About the wholesale price index a moment ago. One of the big areas where prices were going up at wholesale very rapidly was lumber and other materials associated with home building.
But the president wasn't listening. He tried to spend his way out of trouble.
Going to wind up having its impact on the cost.
To add insult to injury, he declared, "Now I'm a Keynesian." Dick Cheney was a young aide at the time.
I always remember a debate we had during the Nixon administration when the public was convinced that food prices were going up. So the political debate was whether or not we should impose a freeze on food prices.
The supposedly conservative Republican Nixon opted for wage and price controls.
Time has come for a new economic policy for the United States. Its targets are unemployment, inflation.
At one point, President Nixon spoke up and quoted Nikita Khrushchev. And he said, Khrushchev once told me that sometimes in order to be a statesman, you have to be a politician for a while.
The problem with him was that he was willing to sacrifice principle too easily for political advantage.
The voters liked the president's war on prices. Nixon was re-elected in a landslide. The economy did less well,